Nonviolent communication. In the course of a typical day, we communicate with a variety of people, including our family members, co-workers, and others. Unfortunately, senseless arguments frequently start up in talks, and as a result, we frequently feel ignored or dejected when we leave them. This can assist you to avoid these scenarios, since that is not how it should be and it doesn't have to be. Explore the idea of nonviolent communication and discover practical ways to use it to keep and possibly even strengthen your relationships in your daily life. You will discover how to respond appropriately to comments like, "You're the most selfish person I've ever known," why you should keep your observations and evaluations separate, and why you shouldn't immediately accuse your partner of leaving dirty socks lying around the home. Everyday life in any community depends on communication, therefore learning to speak well is essential if we want to get along with everyone. Unfortunately, we frequently use language that hinders communication and, worse yet, is harmful to both the speaker and the listener. When our words build walls instead of bridges, communication becomes life-alienating. For instance, criticizing a friend for eating the last piece of cake off the plate is judgmental and makes the person defensive. Alternately, a straightforward investigation of their motivations might lead to a solution. Additionally, using this kind of language distances us from our compassionate selves, which makes both individuals and nations more aggressive. O.J. Harvey, a psychology professor at the University of Colorado, has looked at the relationship between language and violence. He read random passages from various works of literature from throughout the world and searched for words like good and evil that categorize people. According to the study, there were more violent episodes in the nations whose literature used more pejorative language. Harvey came to the conclusion that societies that categorize people as good or bad foster the notion that bad people need to be punished, which fuels violent episodes. However, communication that alienates living things goes well beyond good or bad. In fact, this type of communication uses a number of language techniques that aid in bridging social boundaries. Moralistic judgment is one of these strategies. Moralistic judgments indicate that someone who behaves differently from your value system is acting wrongly and generally take the form of insults, criticisms, and labels. Imagine a daughter who wants to leave her parents' home but they are worried that she is not ready and would endanger herself. But rather than communicating with compassion and attempting to understand her viewpoint, they accuse her of being selfish. They might have a sympathetic conversation about it instead of labeling her selfish, by taking the time to consider their own needs as well as those of their kid. Perhaps the parents' greatest concern is how much they'll miss their daughter rather than anything else. Instead of alienating one another, they might work out their issues by speaking in a loving manner. However, this is only the beginning. Next we will demonstrate in detail how to begin speaking with compassion. It's never easy to express feelings, especially when they are unfavorable. Fortunately, there is a potent technique that can aid us. A method of communication that enables us to connect with others and ourselves on a heart level is known as nonviolent communication, NVC. The concept of nonviolence, which refers to our heart's inherent state of being free from violence and brimming with love, was popularized by Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of the Indian independence movement. According to NVC, language defines our interactions with others and ourselves. This is referred to as communication. Combining the two results in a conversational strategy that increases our awareness of the words we use and the manner in which we listen to others. The NVC method's ability to facilitate effective communication of our feelings is one of its primary advantages. It accomplishes this by enticing us to look at things objectively, recognize our wants, and speak with compassion. Think of Jim as your unruly son. Instead of instantly yelling at him to tidy them up when you notice that he has left his toys strewn across the living room floor for the third time today, begin by just observing the issue. Next, attempt to identify your feelings as you watch the scene. Are you concerned for Jim's safety? Or are you upset that you have to keep saying the same thing? You may come to the realization that you are frustrated and irritated after pausing to think about yourself. The needs that result from these sensations must now be determined. Your requirement can be, for instance, to maintain a tidy home. But before you speak, consider how you may persuade the other person to improve your life without harming them. Form an honest, direct, and compassionate request when you are ready. Jim, I get upset when I see your toys in the living room because I need the spaces that we share to be more organized. When you're done playing, would you be willing to move your toys into your room? Let's now take a closer look at the NVC approach's observation component. Now that we know that effective communication and observation go hand in hand, let's look at some strategies for honing our observational abilities. Start by concentrating all of your efforts on being present. Consider how what the other person is saying is affecting your well-being as you pay close attention to what they are saying. To feel as connected to the scenario as possible, use all of your senses, including touch, sight, and hearing. The next stage is to keep your arguments from becoming too generic. You can achieve this by connecting observations to concrete examples. Instead of saying you constantly, mention a specific instance when something bothered you. You may mention the fact that your partner once again neglected to pick up the dog food from the pet store, for instance. It's crucial to recognize the difference between observation and appraisal, though. According to Indian philosopher J. Krishnamurti, the highest type of intellect is observation without judgment. It might be challenging for some people to distinguish between observation and criticism or judgment. A more accurate statement would be my boss does not arrive before 8:30 a.m. as opposed to the judgment my boss is always late. Similar to the preceding example, saying you rarely heed my counsel is an assessment rather than the more true statement. The previous 3 times I offered advice, you refused to accept it. The specificity of both observations lessens the possibility of a mistake. Additionally, they are uncritical, which stops the person who is receiving your message from defending themselves. Being conscious of labeling is another technique to enhance observation. Labels might make it difficult to relate to a certain circumstance or person. For example, presuming someone is liberal or conservative may cloud your judgment while addressing a particular topic because you know what they would say. We now know that the initial step in NVC is clear observation. But in order to communicate as clearly as possible, we now need to learn how to completely express our own emotions. We can start by appropriately expressing our emotions to get there. We are rarely pushed to examine our genuine feelings, which might be an issue. Being explicit is the greatest way to communicate, especially considering how ambiguous the English language can be at times. For instance, we frequently use the verb feel without genuinely expressing our emotions. Expressing your particular emotional state by using a common phrase like I feel a little depressed is vague and ineffective. However, taking the effort to choose the appropriate terminology can enable you to explain your circumstance more precisely. So, instead of simply expressing, I feel a little depressed, add more pointed words and explain your feelings. Are you experiencing sadness, regret, or betrayal? By increasing your vocabulary, you may start putting this into practice right away. A wide vocabulary will provide you access to a greater variety of emotions from which to choose while expressing yourself. Pronouns are similarly subject to this ambiguity issue. Making the generalization I feel like everyone is ignoring me is vague and omits addressing details. Connect your experiences to actual people and places to avoid this misunderstanding. I contacted my sister for advice yesterday morning, but she didn't reply. At lunch today, my boss and I had the similar interaction, which left me feeling underappreciated. Make an effort to describe what happened and how you felt at the time. Finally, you'll need to develop the skill to communicate your vulnerability. Neglecting your genuine emotions can lead to unwelcome friction among friends, family, and coworkers. Some professional norms, such as those for lawyers, engineers, and the military, even forbid expressing vulnerability as a sign of weakness. Instead of holding your emotions inside, utilize NVC to build communication channels by being observant, identifying your needs and wants, and making specific requests. You ought to now be more comfortable with NVC and able to pay more attention to your feelings as a result. But there's more to improving your emotional responses. You also need to own up to them. When communicating with others, you can achieve this by first identifying your own requirements. Our feelings may be stimulated by the behavior of others, but they are not the root of those feelings. Instead, how we feel about what people say to us is determined by how we respond. For instance, if someone says to us, "You're the most selfish person I've ever encountered," we'll instinctively react negatively. However, let's examine 4 possible responses to this assertion. First, you can respond negatively to what they say and declare, "It's all my fault." By placing the blame on yourself, you neglect to consider the message's underlying issues and the other person's complaint. You can feel bad, down, or even depressed as a result. Second, you can become hostile or defensive. You might reply, "That's a lie. I've always thought about your needs." In this case, you are criticizing the speaker and omitting to address the core problem. A more effective response would be to express your own emotions, such as "I feel disheartened when you claim I'm selfish when I've been deliberately attempting to meet your needs." You can recognize your own emotional response and address the conflict's root causes by verbalizing it. Finally, and ideally, you can watch the speaker's emotions and needs. "Do you believe I'm selfish because of a particular action I've taken?" you might inquire. "How can I give your requirements greater consideration?" Now that we have a clearer understanding of our feelings and responses, let's examine another difficult subject, determining your needs. This is challenging because individuals haven't had enough practice doing it. Instead, they get caught up in the blame game. Because we frequently keep our wants hidden and then blame others for not meeting them, the blame game is a classic example of a catch-22. Without explicitly communicating that we want the kitchen to be organized, we could chastise our partners for being sloppy because they don't adhere to our standards of orderliness, such as when they leave dirty dishes in the kitchen. And if we blame them, they'll probably feel bad and act defensively right away. There is a solution to this problem, and it begins with us clearly stating our own demands. Unfortunately, a lot of people find it challenging and even frightening to express their actual feelings. Because they have been raised to take care of others, women in particular frequently overlook their own needs. But we can all improve our directness. Simply said, you must articulate yourself clearly if you want others to understand you and be receptive to your requirements. In fact, the more open you are about your requirements, the simpler it will be for others to compassionately meet your demands. Therefore, if your boyfriend forgets to wash the dishes, express your feelings to him and suggest a workable alternative for both of you. Cleaning filthy dishes after a long day at work stresses me out. Before I come back, could you check that they are clean? Or perhaps we might construct a schedule and divide the tasks? If you don't express your requirements clearly, you'll eventually put a lot of unnecessary stress on yourself. You must pay close attention to your personal requirements as soon as you can. The second topic we'll examine in more detail is how to honestly convey our wants after we've identified them. 3 aspects of peaceful communication have been discussed thus far: observations, feelings, and wants. Let's go to the NVC's final phase, requests. How do we ask for things in a way that people will respond to us with compassion? To be clear about what you really want, make a request. Additionally, we are more likely to receive what we desire from others if we are more clear about what we want. This entails expressing requests in constructive terms. In contrast to negative language, which is used to request that someone cease doing something, positive language is used to request that something be done. The latter can occasionally be ambiguous, which can cause miscommunication or confusion. For instance, a man whose wife would frequently arrive home from work late scolded her, "You spend too much time at work." She deduced from this disparaging wording that she was working too much, and the following week she registered for a kayaking excursion. However, the husband didn't want her to do this. Rather, he wanted her to stay at home and spend more time with him. "I would like you to spend at least one evening with the kids and me every week," would have been a better request. Making requests into specific instructions will help others understand what has to be done. Consider a manager who wants to hear from his staff but is aware that they are reluctant to speak up. "I'd like you to feel free to share your opinions with me," he could remark. He is saying that he wants them to feel free to say whatever they want by doing this. He leaves out the particular steps they could take in order to feel free, though. He should use the principles of positive action language to make the following request to assist them in doing so. "I'd like you to tell me what I might do to make it simpler for you to feel free to share your opinions with me." As we've seen, NVC is a fantastic tool for enhancing relationships with other people, but it also has the potential to help you enhance your connection with yourself. Understanding when you are not being compassionate to yourself is the first step to improving your connection with yourself, and critical self-talk is a major sign of this behavior. This is the inner voice that constantly berates us for even the smallest errors. It's possible that you've already heard yourself exclaim, "I'm such an idiot," or "I can't believe I've done it again," or "How could I be so stupid?" Now, try to better comprehend and pinpoint the demands that are motivating your self-judgment rather of getting stuck in this self-hating internal conversation. Self-judgments, like all other judgments, are actually the expression of unmet needs. Therefore, you should stop listening to judgmental self-talk as soon as it starts and instead concentrate on your unmet needs. Consider the following scenario: you are preparing to deliver a lecture, and while you are racing to finish the strawberry yogurt before the class, you spill it. "How could I goof up again?" You can already hear the voice in your head asking. Instead of listening to this negativity, pause and consider what unmet need this self-judgment is expressing for you. You might need some time to understand this. But gradually you may come to understand that in your desire to help others by presenting a fantastic presentation, you neglected your own need to look after yourself. You chose a bowl of yogurt as a quick fix because you didn't give yourself enough time to eat, but you ended up spilling it. Now you can say to yourself, "It's okay, you'll pay more attention to your own needs next time," in place of the self-criticism. You will have the chance to mourn the reality that you are imperfect if you can learn to completely connect with your unfulfilled wants. Even though you might be disappointed that you were never able to live up to your ideal self-image, at least you won't despise yourself any longer for it. We have been concentrating on 4 NVC elements that are crucial for accurate self-expression. Let's now examine how to use the same concepts to improve our listening abilities. First and foremost, we must listen empathically if we want to completely comprehend another person. This entails making time and space for people to completely express their feelings, as well as making an effort to feel those emotions yourself. The majority of people instead give advice, answers, or reassurance in place of doing this. However, it's possible that you're not really listening to the other person's feelings when you're trying to solve their situation. The finest course of action is to pay close attention and probe about their requirements, sentiments, and desires. They may occasionally require counsel or even simply a hug, but other times they may not even be aware of their own needs. Here's where contemplation and paraphrasing really shine. Sometimes, what people claim and believe they need is not what they actually need. You can aid them in communicating what they are trying to say by reflecting and paraphrasing. Your supervisor might say, for instance, "You're not a good communicator. She has never complained about this before," which confounds you. You then tell her what she said about you in return, "I'm not a good communicator." Since no one was aware of the missed delivery yesterday, she may now elaborate on her point and remark, "Yes, we missed a delivery yesterday. We missed a delivery because none of the team members were aware of it," so you paraphrase what she said back to her in your own terms to make sure you understand. This lets her know that you've comprehended and gives her the chance to make any required corrections. Instead, she says, "Yes, we need to update the system so everyone is informed when a delivery is due," confirming what you've indicated. She now understands that her issue is with the current system, not with you, thanks to your use of NVC. Conflicts in our daily lives are something that none of us can avoid. Fortunately, the NVC tenets offer practical conflict resolution methods. So, here's what to do the following time sparks fly. You must first and foremost build a human connection. It is via this connection that the parties can begin to comprehend one another's wants and feelings. The next step is to make sure that the desire to connect is genuine. The intention must be made plain right away that it is not to control the other party but rather to establish a secure environment in which each side can voice their requirements. This can be done by monitoring and analyzing feelings, relating them to the needs of both parties, and coming up with specific, workable requests. Then, these requests are looked at with the intention of obtaining satisfaction rather than compromising. When both parties' wants are fully addressed, there is satisfaction. This contrasts with compromise, where both parties make a trade-off and neither is completely happy. Take, for instance, a disagreement between a couple about walking their dog. "You never take the dog out," one spouse claims, to which the other partner retorts, "I always take the dog out." They both come to the realization that taking the dog out conflicts with their individual schedules after observing and identifying their feelings. "I need you to walk the dog in the morning since I constantly miss my train," one partner says to the other. "That's okay with me," says the other partner in response. "However, it seems reasonable that you walk the dog on the weekends so I can go golfing." Both partners are ultimately satisfied since they get what they want from them. A methodical approach to reducing conflict in our hearts and in our interpersonal interactions is nonviolent communication. We may progressively improve the world by speaking with compassion and being attentive to everyone's needs, including our own. What you ought to do in order to put your newfound information to use. Be aware of your needs. When you next experience rage, take a moment to breathe and consider where it came from. Instead than thinking on who you are angry at, ask yourself, why am I angry? You can recognize that it is your reaction, not other people, that is causing you to be furious by addressing the feelings that are the source of your rage. You'll soon regain control of the circumstance and realize which of your demands is still unmet. Thanks for watching.